After surviving life-threatening missions on the battlefield, Jake Reynolds believed he had left the toughest days of his life behind. He dreamed of a warm embrace, a loving wife, and the comfort of home. What awaited him wasn't a hero's welcome, it was a betrayal so devastating that no amount of training could have prepared him for the pain. Imagine this, the person you'd take a bullet for, the person who stood beside you through life's toughest storms, suddenly becomes the one to drive the knife into your back. How do you recover when trust, the foundation of all relationships, is shattered by the very people you held closest? For Jake, the heartbreak cut deeper than the physical scars of war. It wasn't just the loss of love, it was the realization that everything he fought to protect had been stolen from him. Picture this, Jake's plane touches down, the applause of a grateful nation ringing in his ears. His heart pounds with excitement as he imagines the moment he'll see Emily again. The small, hand-carved wooden box in his bag, a gift he spent weeks crafting in the deserts of Afghanistan, is a testament to his love and longing. He expects tears of joy, an embrace that melts away the months of separation, and the promise of a new chapter in their life together. But as he steps through the front door of the house he fought so hard to return to, something feels off. The air is heavy. The pictures on the wall, once filled with memories of their love, have been replaced. The warm scent of home is gone, replaced by the cold indifference of abandonment. And most telling of all, Emily isn't there to greet him. Instead, he finds a letter, a name scrawled at the bottom that makes his stomach drop. Kyle. What happens next will shake you to your core. Before we break down this shocking story of betrayal, heartbreak, and resilience, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to this channel for more unforgettable tales of human emotion and strength. After enduring ambushes, explosions, and sleepless nights in enemy territory, Jake Reynolds believed nothing could shake his iron will. He faced death on the battlefield countless times, but what he was about to encounter at home would hit harder than any bullet ever could. Jake wasn't just a Marine, he was a leader, a man others looked to when fear gripped their hearts in the chaos of war. Decorated with medals for his bravery and unshakable discipline, Jake had been on the front lines of some of the most grueling missions during his 18-month deployment in Afghanistan. Despite the harsh realities of war, he carried with him a sense of hope fueled by two people who meant the world to him. Emily, his high school sweetheart and loving wife, and Kyle, his best friend and blood brother since childhood. Emily had always been his anchor, the reason he fought so hard to come home. Their love was the stuff of romance novels, filled with handwritten letters during deployments and whispered promises of forever. Meanwhile, Kyle wasn't just a friend, he was family. They had made a childhood pact sealed with a drop of blood, vowing to always have each other's backs no matter what. For Jake, Emily, and Kyle represented everything good in his life, his past, his present, and the future he dreamed of. The final weeks of Jake's deployment were spent imagining his homecoming. He replayed the moment in his head, Emily rushing into his arms, her tears soaking his uniform, as she whispered how proud she was of him. He pictured her laugh, her touch, and the way she made their house feel like home. During rare moments of calm overseas, Jake had poured his love into a special gift for Emily, a hand-carved wooden box, intricately designed with the initials J plus E inside a heart. Each groove of the carving represented hours spent under the hot desert sun, thinking of her and the life they'd continue building together. He also thought of Kyle, his brother, in every way but blood. Kyle had been the one to look after Emily while Jake was away, keeping her company during lonely nights and helping out with the little things Jake couldn't. The thought of them together gave Jake comfort, two pillars of his life supporting each other in his absence. As the plane touched down, Jake felt a rush of adrenaline. The horrors of war were behind him, and all that awaited him now was love, warmth, and peace. When Jake arrived home, the picture in his mind didn't match reality. The house, once filled with love and laughter, felt cold and distant. The lights were dim and the walls, once adorned with pictures of their life together, seemed barren. Emily wasn't there to greet him. He had imagined her running into his arms, crying tears of joy, but the only sound was the soft hum of the refrigerator. Something felt off, but Jake, ever the rational Marine, told himself she must have been out running errands or caught up in something unexpected. He placed his duffel bag down and walked through the house, his footsteps echoing in the silence. As he moved into the kitchen, he noticed an envelope on the counter. It wasn't the kind of mail you'd ignore. It had Emily's name written in a hurried scrawl. What caught Jake's eye wasn't the envelope itself, but the signature at the bottom of the note inside. It read, "Yours, Kyle." For a brief moment, Jake froze. The name didn't fit. Why would Kyle, a man who knew Jake better than anyone, be writing intimate letters to his wife? Shaking off the feeling, Jake told himself it was nothing to worry about. Maybe Kyle had been helping Emily with something while he was away. After all, Kyle was family. If there was one person Jake could trust besides Emily, it was him. But as Jake sat alone in the silence of his empty home, an uneasiness began to creep in, one he couldn't quite explain. Something was missing. Something was wrong. Jake Reynolds thought he'd survived the worst life could throw at him, but nothing could have prepared him for the gut-wrenching moment he walked into his own home and found betrayal staring him in the face. It was late, and the house was eerily quiet. Jake lay awake in the guest room, his mind restless. Emily still hadn't returned his calls or texts, and her absence gnawed at him. He chalked it up to miscommunication. Maybe she was staying with a friend, unaware he'd come home earlier than expected. But as the night stretched on, a faint sound broke the silence. It wasn't just any sound. It was laughter. Soft, intimate, and coming from the master bedroom. Jake froze. His heart, which had weathered years of combat, began to race in a way it hadn't even during the most dangerous firefights. He strained to hear, hoping his mind was playing tricks on him. But then he caught it again. Muffled voices, followed by more laughter. It wasn't the sound of strangers, it was familiar, painfully so. Rising from the bed, Jake's legs felt heavy, as if every step toward the bedroom door added another pound of doubt and fear. The carved wooden box he had crafted for Emily sat on the kitchen counter, forgotten amidst the sudden tension in the air. With his pulse pounding in his ears, Jake pushed open the bedroom door. And there they were. Emily and Kyle, tangled together in the bed Jake had shared with his wife for years. The sight hit him like a sledgehammer. His blood brother and his soulmate, two of the people he had trusted most, were locked in an embrace that screamed betrayal louder than any words ever could. For a moment the room was silent. Time itself seemed to stop as Jake's mind struggled to process what his eyes were seeing. Emily gasped, pulling away from Kyle as if her movement could erase the scene. "Jake," her voice trembled, barely a whisper. "Don't." His voice, sharp and raw, cut through the air like a blade. "Don't you dare say my name right now." Kyle, still sitting on the edge of the bed, didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. Instead, he leaned forward, rubbing the back of his neck like he was dealing with an awkward misunderstanding. "It's not what you think," Emily stammered, her face pale and her eyes wide with panic. Jake's eyes darted between them. "Not what I think? You're in our bed, together!" His voice cracked, a mix of rage and heartbreak as his hands clenched into fists. Emily began to cry, words spilling out in fragments. I was lonely, Jake. You were gone for so long. I didn't know what to do. Kyle was there for me. He kept me company. It wasn't supposed to happen, but..." "But what?" Jake roared, stepping closer. "You couldn't wait for me? You couldn't hold on just a little longer? You think this is some excuse to throw everything we've built away?" Kyle finally spoke, his voice calm, almost smug. "Jake, man, calm down. It's not like we planned this, it just happened. You were gone for 18 months. You can't blame us for finding comfort in each other." Jake's jaw tightened, his gaze fixed on Kyle with a fire that could have burned through steel. "You're my brother, my blood brother. I trusted you to look after her, not to crawl into my bed the moment my back was turned." Kyle shrugged, standing up as if to match Jake's intensity. "Maybe if you weren't so focused on the Marines, this wouldn't have happened. You chose your country over her, Jake. What did you expect?" The words hit Jake harder than any physical blow ever could. He stumbled back a step, his breath ragged as rage and heartbreak collided in his chest. Before he knew it, Jake's fist connected with Kyle's face. The sound of the impact echoed through the room as Kyle staggered backward, clutching his jaw. Emily screamed, rushing to put herself between them. "Stop it, both of you," she cried, her voice cracking as tears streamed down her face. But Jake wasn't listening. His vision blurred with fury, his chest heaving as he stared down at the man he had once called his brother. "You threw everything away, Kyle. Everything." Emily sobbed, reaching out to Jake, but he pulled away. "Don't," he said through gritted teeth. "Don't touch me. You've made your choice." Without another word, Jake stormed out of the house. The walls that had once symbolized love and safety now felt suffocating, haunted by the betrayal he couldn't unsee. Emily's cries followed him out the door, but he didn't look back. Jake climbed into his truck, his hands gripping the steering wheel as tears blurred his vision. His entire world had crumbled in the span of a single night. The woman he loved, the brother he trusted, both gone in an instant. Betrayal doesn't happen in a moment, it festers in the shadows, waiting for the right time to strike. As Jake's world falls apart, he begins to uncover that Kyle's betrayal wasn't an accident. It was years in the making. In the stillness of the night, as Jake sat alone in his truck with his fists clenched and his mind spinning, the memories began to flood in. The betrayal wasn't just about the affair, it was about something deeper, something that had been there all along, hidden behind forced smiles and hollow words of encouragement. Kyle had always been there, hadn't he? In the backyard when Jake and Emily first started dating, at their wedding, standing by Jake's side as his best man. Even during deployment, Kyle had been the one Jake trusted to check in on Emily, ensuring she never felt alone. But now, as Jake replayed the past, he saw things he had ignored. Small moments that suddenly carried a sinister weight. There were the sarcastic comments Kyle made during family gatherings, always masked as jokes. "Must be nice being the golden boy, huh, Jake? Saving the world and still getting the girl." Or the way Kyle's smile never quite reached his eyes when Jake shared stories of his military achievements. Flashbacks hit Jake like a tidal wave. He remembered the day he showed Kyle the engagement ring he had bought for Emily. Instead of congratulating him, Kyle laughed awkwardly and muttered, "Guess you're winning at everything these days, huh?" At the time, Jake brushed it off, thinking it was just Kyle's way of joking. But now, he realized it wasn't humor, it was jealousy. Kyle had envied him for years. Every medal Jake earned, every story of bravery he shared, and every moment of happiness Jake found with Emily, it had all been fuel to a fire Jake hadn't known was burning. The affair wasn't a mistake. It was Kyle's way of tearing down the man he could never be. Sitting in the driver's seat of his truck, Jake felt an overwhelming mix of emotions: anger, heartbreak, betrayal, and guilt. How could he have been so blind? How could he have let the two people he loved most destroy him from the inside out? Jake's hands trembled as he gripped the steering wheel, the memories and revelations suffocating him. He thought about Emily, the woman who had promised to stand by him through thick and thin. How could she turn to Kyle, knowing what Jake had sacrificed for her? He thought about Kyle, the man he had trusted as a brother, a man who had shared his childhood, his victories, and his secrets. He wasn't just angry, he was devastated. The foundation of his life had been shattered, and every memory felt like a lie. He found himself staring at the wooden box he had carved for Emily, still sitting on the passenger seat. It was supposed to symbolize their love, a love that now felt like it had never truly existed. Seeking solace, Jake reached out to one of the only people he could trust, Sergeant Alvarez, a fellow Marine who had been by his side through some of the toughest battles in Afghanistan. Meeting Alvarez at a local diner, Jake poured his heart out over coffee and silence that felt heavier than words. Alvarez listened intently, his rugged face etched with concern as Jake detailed everything: the affair, the betrayal, and the unbearable weight of it all. "You're letting them win, Jake," Alvarez said finally, his voice calm but firm. "I know it hurts, man. God, I can't even imagine the pain. But letting this destroy you? That's not who you are." Jake stared at his coffee, his mind racing. Alvarez leaned in, his tone sharp. "You survived firefights, ambushes, losing brothers on the battlefield. You don't let the enemy take you down, and you sure as hell don't let people like Kyle and Emily take you down either. They don't deserve that kind of power over you." "But how do I move on from this?" Jake asked, his voice cracking under the weight of his emotions. How do I rebuild when everything I trusted is gone? You rebuild because you have to, Alvarez said, his words cutting through the fog in Jake's mind. Because you're better than this. Because life doesn't end with their betrayal. It begins with your decision to rise above it. Focus on your future, Jake. Don't let the past hold you prisoner. As Jake left the diner that night, Alvarez's words echoed in his mind. For the first time since the betrayal, he felt a flicker of clarity. The pain was still there, raw and unrelenting, but Alvarez was right. Jake couldn't let them define his future. He didn't know what the road ahead looked like, but he knew one thing: he wouldn't let Kyle's jealousy or Emily's betrayal destroy him. Jake had faced worse enemies in life, and now he was ready to face the fight within himself. The crisp air was heavy with tension as Jake stood alone in the clearing, the moonlight casting long shadows over the secluded spot he and Kyle used to call their secret place. This was where they had grown up together, skipping rocks, sharing dreams, and vowing to always have each other's backs. Now that sacred ground would be the stage for the confrontation Jake never thought he'd have to face. Jake had asked Kyle to meet him here under the guise of needing closure. He wanted answers, yes, but more than that, he wanted Kyle to feel the weight of what he had done. Jake's fists clenched as he heard the familiar crunch of footsteps approaching. "Jake?" Kyle called out hesitantly as he stepped into the clearing. His usual confident smirk was gone, replaced by a nervous energy that betrayed his guilt. "I wasn't sure if you'd actually show up." Jake didn't respond immediately. Instead, he fixed Kyle with a piercing stare, his jaw tight. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold, cutting through the silence like a blade. "You destroyed everything I cared about, Kyle. You betrayed me in the worst way possible. And for what? What did you gain from it?" Kyle shifted uncomfortably, avoiding Jake's eyes. "Jake, listen." "No!" Jake roared, his voice cracking with the force of his emotions. "You don't get to explain this away. I trusted you with my life. I trusted you with Emily. You were my brother." Kyle's shoulders slumped as he finally met Jake's gaze, shame flickering across his face. I don't know, okay?" he stammered. "I guess I was jealous. You always had everything. Emily, your military career, the respect of everyone around you. I wanted a piece of that, and I guess I didn't care who I hurt to get it." Jake let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "Jealousy? That's your excuse? You could have talked to me, Kyle. You could have said something. Instead, you went behind my back and tore my life apart. Do you even realize what you've done?" Kyle looked down, unable to respond. For the first time, Jake saw something in him he hadn't seen before. Fear. Fear of losing the bond they once shared, fear of being judged, and maybe even fear of himself. Jake stepped closer, his voice dropping to a low growl. "You didn't just betray me, Kyle. You betrayed the years of trust, the loyalty we built, and every damn promise we made to each other. And for what? To take something that wasn't yours to take?" Kyle's voice cracked as he tried to defend himself. "I didn't mean for it to go this far, Jake. "Stop," Jake interrupted, holding up a hand. "I didn't bring you here to listen to your excuses. I brought you here to tell you that this is it. You and I, we're done. You're no brother of mine." The words hit Kyle like a physical blow, and for a moment, he looked like the scared teenager Jake had once protected from bullies. But Jake wasn't here to protect him anymore. Kyle's voice trembled as he took a step forward. "Jake, please. We've been through everything together. Don't let this be the end. I messed up, but I can make it right. Just give me a chance." Jake's expression hardened. "A chance? You had your chance, Kyle. You had years of them. And every single time you chose yourself over me, over Emily, over everything we built." For a moment, the two men stood in silence, the weight of their shared history pressing down on them. Jake wanted to feel something. Anger, sadness, maybe even pity, but all he felt was numb. As Kyle's pleas faded into the night, Jake turned his back on him. "We're done," he said again, his voice steady but final. "Don't ever contact me again." Jake walked away, leaving Kyle alone in the clearing. With every step, he felt the bond between them breaking, the memories they had shared disintegrating like ashes in the wind. Later that night, as Jake sat in his truck, his phone buzzed with a call from Emily. He stared at the screen, her name glowing in the darkness. For a moment he considered answering, listening to her apologies, her excuses, her promises to make things right. But then he remembered the image of her in Kyle's arms, and the hollow ache in his chest hardened into resolve. He let the call go to voicemail. A few minutes later, a text appeared. "Jake, please. I know I hurt you, but I need to explain. I love you. I'm sorry." Jake deleted the message without replying. He knew now that no explanation could erase the betrayal, no apology could undo the pain. Some wounds didn't heal, and some bridges were better left burned. As he drove away from the memories, the heartbreak, and the betrayal, Jake felt a flicker of hope. Hope that one day he would rebuild his life without the people who had shattered it. For now, though, he would carry the scars as a reminder of the lessons learned. Trust carefully, love fiercely, and never let betrayal define you. Jake Reynolds had endured the unthinkable, the battlefield scars of war and the deeper wounds inflicted by betrayal. But as the pieces of his shattered world lay before him, Jake made a decision that would surprise even himself. He wouldn't let this pain define him. Instead, he would rise, stronger and more determined than ever, to create a new life worth living. The silence of his empty home became unbearable, each corner a reminder of the love and trust that had been broken. Jake knew he couldn't stay there, wallowing in the wreckage of what once was. He needed to reclaim his life, starting with a purpose that would pull him from the depths of despair. Through the recommendation of his Marine buddy, Sergeant Alvarez, Jake joined a local veterans reintegration program. The program provided support to soldiers like him, men and women struggling to adapt to civilian life after years of service. At first, Jake was hesitant. What could he possibly offer when he barely felt whole himself? But the moment he walked into that first group session, something shifted. Sitting across from a young recruit fresh out of basic training, Jake saw a reflection of himself, determined yet unsure, brave yet haunted. The recruit shared his struggles of fitting in, of feeling lost in a world that moved too fast and cared too little. Jake, for the first time in months, found himself speaking with clarity and conviction. "I know what you're feeling," Jake said, his voice steady. "It's like you're still fighting a war even though the battlefield's gone. But you're not alone, and you don't have to fight this alone." That moment sparked something in Jake. Over the next few weeks, he became a mentor in the program, leading sessions, sharing his own story, and offering guidance to those who had lost their way. He poured his energy into helping others, using his pain as fuel to uplift those around him. Through the program, Jake began to heal. The betrayal that had once consumed him no longer felt like an open wound, but rather a scar, a reminder of the lessons learned and the strength he had gained. Each story he heard, each life he touched, reminded him that his struggles weren't meaningless. His survival was a testament to resilience, and his experiences could light the way for others to navigate their own darkness. Despite his progress, one part of Jake's journey remained unresolved. Emily and the carved wooden box he had made for her. That box was supposed to symbolize their love, but now it was a painful relic of a life he no longer wanted to carry with him. One quiet morning, Jake made a decision. With the box in hand, he drove to the neighborhood where he and Emily had once dreamed of raising a family. It was the same place where he and Kyle had played as kids, the same streets that had once felt full of hope and possibility. He found an old oak tree at the edge of the park where they had shared so many moments of joy. With a small shovel, he dug a hole beneath its sturdy roots. He placed the carved box inside, pausing for a moment to trace the intricate details he had once poured his heart into. "This doesn't define me anymore," Jake whispered. "It's time to let it go." As the dirt covered the box, Jake felt a weight lift from his chest. He stood there for a long moment, letting the breeze wash over him, the leaves rustling as if offering their approval. For the first time in months, he felt free, not just from the betrayal, but from the anger and grief that had held him captive. Walking away from the tree, Jake carried himself differently. His steps were purposeful, his head held high. The pain was still there, but now it was accompanied by a quiet strength, a newfound sense of direction. Jake's story wasn't one of bitterness or revenge. it was one of redemption. Through his pain, he found a way to help others, to rebuild himself, and to honor the man he was meant to be. He had faced betrayal, endured heartbreak, and chosen to rise above it all. Jake's story reminds us all that pain, no matter how deep, can be transformed into power. That betrayal, no matter how devastating, doesn't have to define our future, and that redemption is always within reach, if we're brave enough to seek it. Betrayal is a wound that cuts deep, often deeper than physical scars. It leaves a mark on the soul, forcing us to question everything we thought we knew about trust, loyalty, and love. Jake Reynolds' story is not just one of heartbreak. It's a story of survival, healing, and finding the courage to rebuild when your world falls apart. Jake's journey teaches us a powerful lesson. Even when faced with the ultimate betrayal, it's possible to rise above it. He endured unimaginable pain, not only from the battlefields of war but from the people he held closest to his heart. What makes Jake's story remarkable isn't just the betrayal he suffered, but how he chose to respond to it. Instead of allowing the betrayal to consume him, Jake made the bold decision to let go of the people who caused him pain. He realized that forgiveness wasn't about absolving Emily or Kyle. It was about freeing himself. Carrying anger and resentment only chained him to the very betrayal he wanted to escape. Walking away wasn't a sign of weakness, it was the ultimate act of strength and self-respect. Through his resilience, Jake showed us that healing isn't about erasing the scars. It's about wearing them with pride. Every decision he made, from mentoring young recruits to burying the wooden box, symbolized his choice to reclaim his life. He refused to let betrayal define him, proving that we are not what happens to us, but what we choose to become in the aftermath. Jake's story resonates because it mirrors the struggles many of us face. Betrayal might not always come in the form of a spouse or a friend, but we've all felt the sting of trust being broken. His story serves as a reminder that while we can't control what others do to us, we can always control how we respond. Now it's your turn to reflect. What would you have done in Jake's position? Could you have walked away, or would you have fought to salvage what was left of those relationships? Do you agree with Jake's decision to let go, or do you think forgiveness should have come with a second chance? Every story like this sparks questions that challenge our own beliefs about trust, loyalty, and the boundaries of forgiveness. So tell us, how do you think this story should have ended? Let us know in the comments. Your perspective could change how others see Jake's journey, and it might even change how you see your own. If Jake's story moved you, if it made you cry, scream, or reflect, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe for more stories of resilience, heartbreak, and redemption. Every day, we'll bring you tales that remind us of the strength of the human spirit and the power of starting over. Because at the end of the day, life is about rising, even when everything tries to pull you down. And like Jake, we all have the power to write the next chapter of our story, one of healing, purpose, and hope.